Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It is me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is it's a bittersweet, special, emotional journey of an episode this week, as we are discussing a real American hero, number 155. That's right, the final issue of the Marvel Universe from G.I. Joe. It's huge. This was a book that took us by surprise when it came out, and as I've reread it, it's taken me by surprise as well with how emotionally wonderful it is. So if you're new to the show, this is the podcast where I go over every cartoon of the G.I. Joe, episode by episode, and usually with a partner, and we watch it along style like Mystery Science Theater. And then after doing that, we also along the way we did a little cold slither behind the rock. We also did the G.I. Joe Columbo crossover. So we did some Joe and Joe theaters along the way. And then for the last couple of years, I've been giving you Joe on Joe Illustrated, and I have covered all 155 issues of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. This is I'm happy to be here. I did not expect to run this out. I don't know what I thought when I should have expected it, because I tend to lock into things like this and then do them all the way through. But I for some reason, I was just like, we'll get to 155. That's going to take forever. Oh, we did it. We did it, everybody. We did it. I actually went in depth on this on a fellow podcast. So I shared it on Twitter last week, but if you guys want to give it a shout, give it a listen. Recently on an episode of Order of Battle, we got into this very subject. So go out there on your podcatchers and find Order of Battle. It's episode number 81. I believe it dropped on December 28th. And we talked a lot about this very subject, like coming to the end of the journey, and just the creative journey that gets you there, and perseverance and all that stuff. So it was a fun conversation to be had, and so please give them a listen. Alexander and Jason and Joel were awesome to have me on, and I appreciated it so very much. Of course, earlier in the month, our friends over at What's on Joe Mind, Mike and Rack Time, they had me on as a guest, and that was also fantastic. Lots of hot babushka talk. If you don't know what that joke means, listen to their show and you'll see it. So this, I'm feeling wistful. I'm feeling wistful as I sit here and record. Last week, if you guys missed it, check out I did it on Instagram. I live streamed the recording of episode 154 of issue 154. It's actually, technically, it's episode like 295. I'm very close to 300 episodes too here on the main feed. So lots of milestones, but we live streamed it and it was a lot of fun. It ran for over an hour and a half. I had quite a few listeners join in, not quite a few, but more than I expected, especially for last minute stuff. And it was late at night. So thank you to everyone that joined last week and chatted and watched to see how the sausage was made. That was a lot of fun. So this is G.I. Joe 155. Now, before we get into the comic book, I want to thank everyone for following me online at Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. That's at Joe on Joe Pod. On all of your podcatchers, please leave a rate and review. That absolutely helps grow the show. It shows more people are listening, and it gets more ears, actually not eyeballs, but ears on it. And so that helps broaden the impact of the show. And more importantly, and I've been talking about this for about the last month or so, next week is the start of the new era of Joe on Joe. It's You on Joe. And I'm putting the finishing touches on that very first episode, but we also need to start planning for future episodes. I've got a list of people that have signed up, so I've been reaching out to some of them. I will reach out to all of them, but just kind of in time, getting everyone on board. And the concept there is you on Joe. What is your favorite thing about G.I. Joe? And let's talk about it. And we're going to go as in-depth as we can, as personal as we can, and it could be quick. Could be 10-minute conversation, could be 20-minute conversation. I don't know. But I'm producing the first episode now. I'm kind of putting it together and seeing what I like and what I don't. And it'll certainly evolve as we go, but so far it's been fun, and it's going to be a little different. It's going to be exciting. And I can't wait for you guys to hear it. We've got more business to do here. Speaking of business to do, absolutely all of you should go online right now and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They're our fabulous sponsors.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
They really are. They help. They've helped keep the doors open, and all that good stuff. They've signed up through our Patreon page as a Patreon sponsor. So if you want to go to patreon.com/Joe and Joe Pod, you too could become a Patreon. Or if you have a project that you want me to talk about, you can become a Patreon sponsor. So details are there, and we'll get you on the show and we'll get you read up. So I really appreciate every single one of you. You guys help make this happen. So G.I. Joe 155.
You were saying?
I was saying Stalker, and I'm so glad we used Stalker for this, because this issue is it's very personal to Stalker's story and Snake Eyes, obviously Snake Eyes' story as we get into it. But this is the segment of the show where we look at comic books that were on the shelf the same month of release as G.I. Joe 155. 155 is cover dated December of 1994. That means calendar date, it was on the shelves roughly around October of 1994. And we're going to look at DC Comics. Aquaman was crossed over with Lobo. So Aquaman gets grim and gritty just 2 issues ago. It's issue number 4. So just 2 issues ago, he loses his hand and gets a hook for a hand. And they've already got him going up against Lobo, the space Bastich. I like that. Let's not waste any time fighting underwater people. He's now got a hook. He's got a beard. He's got a bad attitude. Let's give him Lobo ASAP. I appreciate that mentality. I love it. Batman versus Predator Volume 2, issue number 1 is on the stands. I always loved these Batman Predator crossovers. The first one was amazing. Then the second one, they started including more of the Bat family. And then I forget what happened in the third one, but it was like it was getting bigger and bigger scope. But they're all good. To see Batman go up against the Predator feels like the ultimate challenge for the Predator, at least, comic book wise. I adored all of them. I thought they were really, really great. There's another very cool Batman book out called Batman Castle of the Bat. This is an Elseworld story. And this is where they were retelling, they did a couple of these. They were retelling classic horror monsters with the superheroes in their place. So this one is Batman as Frankenstein. There was There was a Superman one that my brain is starting to say the Superman one was also like Frankenstein, but this is who did this? Bo Hampton did the artwork on this, and it's really cool. It's all painted. It's got a very well, I guess I'm thinking Bo Hampton, but that's not the artist I'm thinking of. But it's good. But this is like really, it meshes a lot. There's werewolves, there's vampirism, and there's Frankenstein stuff. So it's kind of a mesh of all those universal monsters. So Castle of the Bat is really cool. What was the Superman one? It's killing me now that I can't remember it, but don't worry about it. They did a few of those, and I'm a sucker for Elseworlds. I think it's really, really great. Justice League. So we're on Justice League America 94, and that's, as a series, is kind of trudging along. We're at Justice League Quarterly number 17. Now that's a quarterly book that is amazing that it went 17 issues. It's not great, and I don't think it lasts much longer than this. Then we're on Justice League Task Force issue number 16. Task Force kind of took over the place of Justice League Europe, and Task Force is not terrible. There was, let me click on that and see, the artist was Sal Velluto. That's right, and it was written by Chris Priest and Mark Waid. I enjoyed Task Force. I thought it was great. It definitely throws off that, like we were talking about over at Marvel, Force Works vibe or Fantastic Force. It's definitely threw that vibe away. Or Extreme Justice? But Justice League, don't be fooled by that. Justice League Task Force was really, really good. It's where Mark Waid introduced that character that Marvel then ripped off for the Sentry. The time lost guy, Triumph, that was his name. Where like he was actually a hero that was there all along, but he got stuck in time, so that there was some time travel hijinks, so no one remembered him, but he was really there from the formation of the Justice League and all that stuff. Marvel would absolutely rip that idea off and make the Sentry like 10 years later. Sentry, Sentry, Sentry. So but don't get it twisted. Justice League Task Force is a very cool book with Sal Velluto and Mark Waid and Chris Priest writing. I enjoyed Task Force quite a bit. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Superman's chugging along. Superboy's chugging along. Everything's kind of chugging along. Those are the real big highlights of DC at the time. There's no, I'm looking at this and there's no real like, holy cow, that came out this month kind of a thing. Yeah, I mean, I think Batman Predator's cool. Castle of the Bat's cool. I think we're good.
You were saying?
We also don't want to waste too much time. We want to get to the meat of G.I. Joe 155, so I probably should truncate this entire section anyway. So over at Marvel Comics, the Avengers are now, this was an era a little bit where they were doing some crossing over with X-Men, and they were using that character that the guy that was a what's the what are they called? Oh, acolytes. Oh, well, I mean literally acolytes, but the Magneto's acolytes. That guy Exodus, who I know they eventually explained exactly kind of what he was. Like he's like an immortal crusade mutant or something like that who just got impassioned with Magneto, but I never understood what Exodus's deal was. He's crossing over here with Quicksilver and his bride, the Crystal, who Crystal was a partner. I was on the Avengers at the time. Crystal, the not Eternals. Wow, I'm really blanking on this stuff today. For some reason, some of these words are not jumping into my brain, guys. I apologize for that. She's one of the Inhumans. That's it. Burp, burp. So, yeah. So, Avengers were crossing over. And listen, the X-Men were big as hell. If you're going to cross over with someone, why not have it be the X-Men? That's going to get you eyeballs. The Disney books continue. We're on Beauty and the Beast. Aladdin's continuing. The Disney Afternoon Show, issue 2 is out. It's got Darkwing Duck for all you Darkwing Duck fans out there. Oh, speaking of Fantastic Four, issue number 2, we're on that. Fantastic Four 395, the cover has Payback on there. And if you're wondering what the Payback is for, and it's got a picture of Ben Grimm and Wolverine, it's because there was a good 2-year stretch here in the FF where Ben Grimm wore a mask. I think I've touched on this in the show. And the reason he wore a mask is because Wolverine's claws cut his face open. And he essentially was healing from a wound. But how do you heal from a wound when you're a rock man? It was a cool concept. The mask was frightening. But this is Ben getting his payback with Wolverine. Ghost Rider, Wolverine, Punisher, Dark Design number 1. This was a big crossover. Those 3, absolutely the hottest, like anti-heroes of the time. You know, the most tattooed heroes of the 90s for sure. I think those 3 easily outpaced Spider-Man and stuff. I feel like Spider-Man has caught up in the last 20 years. But in the 90s, I'll bet you those 3 got the most tattoos. Maybe Batman. I'm sure Batman outpaced all of them. Possibly all of them, all 3 of these guys combined. But if you take Batman, who's got to be the front runner in that list, if you take him out, Ghost Rider, a Flaming Skull head, Punisher skull, and then actually, you know what's funny? Probably, let's think about this. Probably Wolverine himself. It's probably not that high on tattooing, because to do him, you'd have to do a full body of him or a head or something like that. Whereas to do the Punisher or Ghost Rider, you have this cool iconography of flaming head, you know, or the Punisher skull, which we 100% all recognize has been co-opted by lunatics in this country, and that's a whole different conversation. But at the time, it's still just a cool designed skull logo, right? At the time, it just meant Punisher. So actually they might have more than Wolverine, because I don't know many people who just like have 3 claws tattooed on them. Yeah, might be. Let's get to the bottom of this whole tattoo debate. Do you have any tattoos? I have a tattoo. I have 1 tattoo in my arm. And no, it's not G.I. Joe. It is actually Legion of Superheroes. It's Ultra Boy. I put an Ultra Boy tattoo on my shoulder. His symbol, not his face. That'd be funny. Just a weird, generically drawn brunette's face on my shoulder. Who's that? Well, it could be Ultra Boy. Could be Monel. Could be Clark Kent. Could be any series of generic brunettes. But no, it's Ultra Boy's logo. Punisher Year 1. So this is them trying to give the Year 1 treatment to the Punisher. This book never really, I mean, it's fine. I've read it. It's whatever. But they've told his origin story many, many times. And I don't think this miniseries really's ever, I don't know if it's ever been collected like in what you'd call a proper trade. It's written by Abnett and Lanning, though, and pencils by Dale Eaglesham, who's great. Oh, and inked by Scott Koblish, not only friend of the show, but also G.I. Joe inker, of course. Scott had a busy month. I mean, I enjoy this series, but I feel like his origin's been told and retold so many times that a Year 1 it's going to be hard to give that any real resonance. I mean, even now, Jason Aaron's kind of revisiting it in his Punisher book and kind of giving new layers to it. So, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever read Year 1, but it's fine, but it just doesn't. Yeah, for all those reasons. I feel like I just said it myself. Ravage 2099 is up to issue number 25. The Garbage Man of the Future got 25 issues. Wow. That is a feat, Ravage. Good for you. Good for you. Oh, this is that other book. Last week I was talking about those like premier oversized like acetate cover books. This is the other one I was thinking of, Tales to Astonish, with Hulk and Hank Pym and the Wasp. Tales to Astonish number 1 was on the shelf this week. And again, them trying to recapture that Marvel's premier status. So X Factor 109 is a Legion quest book, and I believe there's 4 issues to this, and it crosses over through the books. And this is Legion, David Haller, Xavier's son, going on this a quest, so to speak, to find out. I forget exactly what he's looking for, but I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to kill Magneto because he thinks Magneto is the cause of all the problems in his life, the X-Men's world, etc., so on and so forth. But what this ends up in is Legion Quest results in him accidentally killing his own father through traveling through time, which then spurs off the Age of Apocalypse. So seeing Legion Quest reminds me that we are probably about 2 months away from Age of Apocalypse. So that's something to look forward to, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never read that book. But you know what? It's G.I. Joe 155. So we're not going to cover that on this comic book. There you are, this podcast. So, spoiler alert, guys. In a couple months, Age of Apocalypse happens, and I have 0 thoughts for you.
You were saying?
Now, this book came out in October 1994. So, on October 2nd, the most important movie of the year came out. Of course, we're talking about Kenny Rogers' Gambler #5, Playing for Keeps. I love The Gambler. Wow, Mariska Hargitay's in it. I don't recognize. Oh, Martin Kove is in it. Martin Kove from not Cobra Kai, but well, he's in. Yeah, no, technically yes, Cobra Kai, but Karate Kid. I'm thinking of. Bruce Boxleitner, Lonnie Anderson shows up. Dixie Carter, she's great. I loved Designing Women. I thought that show was awesome. Yeah. So if you've never watched a Gambler movie, I think we're in the same boat. I don't know that I've ever seen a Gambler movie, but that song is the greatest song of all time. We got fixated with that song in college. It would have been right around this time, like 94. We got absolutely fixated with the song The Gambler and breaking down the lyrics and figuring out it. Yeah, it's a whole story there. So I love The Gambler. Rest in peace, Kenny. On October 7th, the movie with the Stallone Sharon Stone movie, The Specialist. And they're like he's the best in the business hitman, and I think it's just about explosives too, if I remember. I don't think it's very good. On October 14th, this movie is fabulous. It is a documentary. It is called Hoop Dreams. If you've never seen it, you should. It's long, and it follows a group of kids from Chicago who their goal was to play in the NBA. And it's a real documentary, like old school style, like where they live with them and they get into it, and they spent years with these kids as they went through high school to see if they could make it to the NBA. It's absolutely wonderful. It got a ton of awards at the time. I think Ebert used to call it like his favorite, if not his favorite movie of all time, like absolutely, like he would say it's his favorite documentary. Really, really lovely movie. I didn't see it for years. I saw it when I was in like mid 30s or something, and I fell in love with it. It's fabulous. I know you can get it at a lot of the streaming services, or at least you could for a long time. So Hoop Dreams is great. But of course, the biggest, oh wow, I didn't know this happened. The biggest movie of the 14th was Pulp Fiction. Man, was this movie amazing. I remember where I was when I saw it. I remember seeing it. I remember leaving that theater a different person, like a different understanding of what film could do, of how to tell a story, how to understand storytelling. I was with my boy Irish, and he was visiting University of Illinois, and we went to the movies, and he was driving. I remember driving in the car on the way back to the dorms going like, I don't know I know what we just saw, and it moved me. Like that could be the greatest thing I've ever seen. Absolutely love Pulp Fiction. Still do to this day. I think it's near flawless film. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. Take whatever you think of, Quentin's, his excesses here and there. Just set that aside and just look at Pulp Fiction on its own. It's really fabulous film. Same day though, and I don't know this, Wes Craven's New Nightmare opened on the same day, which is really good too. And it's 100% a precursor to what Wes would do with Scream. But I know it didn't get the love that it did at the time. I don't think the world was ready for that much meta, but Yeah, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is actually pretty entertaining. Then on October 19th, Clerks came out. Clerks was the other movie that I walked out of there going, what just happened? This is now attainable. Like Pulp Fiction was changing the way you looked at storytelling. Clerks was changing the bar for how you thought about getting into being a creative person. Clerks was, I could do this too. And again, whatever you think of Kevin's career, whether it's good, bad, ugly, Clerks on its own was an achievement and a smart movie and a funny movie. And, some of it doesn't hold up just because it's a, 30-year-old movie? Yeah. 30-year-old movie shot in black and white on a, $60,000 budget or something like that. But a lot of it does, and he's never been a great visual filmmaker, but just it's smart and he makes the most of what he has. I love Clerks. I really do. I actually have to see Clerks 3. I haven't seen it yet, and that's my shame. October 21st, The Radioland Murders is out. I think I enjoyed that movie. Oh yeah, this was George Lucas's movie. Yeah, George, because there was a few about like that radio time. This was George Lucas's. Yeah, I think Radioland Murders was pretty entertaining. Brian Benben, Mary Stuart Masterson, Ned Beatty, Stephen Tobolowsky, Michael McKean. Like, there's a lot of cool people in this movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but yeah, I believe I enjoyed it. And then on the 28th, Stargate. Man, I know there's a lot of Stargate fans and the Stargate SG-1 fans, and it spawned a whole universe of everything. When this movie came out, I was like, the concept is great. I want to love this movie. I want to think this is just an awesome new sci-fi world. Then I saw it, and all I could think of was how cheap it looked. They go to this whole other planet, and it's just elephants in costumes. It's like there's one other species, you know what I mean? Like you see Star Wars, and they took the time to build all these different species of creatures and various things and stuff like that. And I remember with Stargate, I was like, there's one animal that's different. Everything else is just shot in the desert on location because it's cheap. And I didn't like it. I love Kurt Russell, and I love the idea. And I've revisited in years since, and I've never been able to shake that feeling of not liking Stargate. I think it's hilarious that French Stewart's one of the soldiers. I think it's awesome. No, I don't. I've never been able to get into Stargate. Can't do it. But I respect it. I respect the concept. Anyway.
Now, mass is ready.
Ooh, it is time, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to get into G.I. Joe 155. Probably the second most coveted. Well, let me take that back. Third most coveted comic book issue of G.I. Joe. Behind one that the letters page of this issue sheds some light on the previous one, which is the special, the Todd McFarlane special one. I never understood when that came out. Like, I always thought it just missed it when it was on the racks. What we learned at the letters page, spoiler alert, I'll just jump to the end here because I can't keep a good secret. What we learned on the letter page is that came out next month. Well, so we actually already covered it on this show. I did a special episode for that because it was reprinted in one of the books. And so we jumped in and did it after we did the original issue 61. But technically, I should have waited until the end. I had no idea that it came out the month after this. So, and if I'm thinking, if this book came out in October of 94, they probably had the license to publish through the end of the year. So they were like, let's fill it up. So October, November, they would have put out the McFarlane one. Let's squeeze one more month out of it. Kind of like how IDW published everything right up to the end. With like the Serpentor special and this reprint special and that reprint special. So I wonder if Marvel did any reprint specials in December. Yeah. So spoiler alert. Next month there was another issue of J. Joe, but it was that McFarlane special, which explains Scott Koblish And it was probably Phil Gosier who did the cover that was the homage to McFarlane. I always wondered how they got on it, and that's because they were the creative team at the time. This is all making sense now, ladies and gentlemen. I've told this story on the show before. I'll tell it again in a quick recap. I had stopped reading G.I. Joe right around 151. This was not on my radar when it happened. It's not like I walked in and saw this on the shelf and said, oh my gosh, the last issue, let me grab this off the rack. I missed it when it was on the rack because it probably got snapped up real quick, or the numbers were so low there weren't any on the shelf when I saw it. I learned that it was the final issue after the fact, and then picked this up that summer. I actually have a nice copy I'm looking at. I like it. My theory has always been that my abandoning Joe was about 4 months earlier was the nail in the coffin, and that's when they were like, all right, our numbers have slipped so much, we gotta axe this thing, call it quits. The subscription numbers are down so much. I feel like, there's always a tipping point. I feel like I was it. So I apologize, G.I. Joe. I apologize to any listeners, any fans out there who want to blame me. I'll carry that burden. The other thing is, I love this cover. Oh, that's the other thing in my head that I wanted to. So we're talking about the most expensive books. It's got to be this one. It's got to be that's Todd McFarlane special, which regularly goes for $300-400, and then a nice copy of 21. Right, those three have to be more expensive than issue number 1. Those 4 definitely are the front runners. So it's absolutely these are the 4 most expensive books. But of those 4, I think 1 is actually the least expensive, right? I don't know. I mean, we could look it up, but I feel like they're all in the running. Maybe it's 1 McFarlane and this one. Maybe 21 is actually, because there's a lot of copies of 21 out there. So maybe 21 is actually swaps places with number 1 in that conversation. Obviously, I could look this up and index all this, but I'm thinking of this as we record, so it's more fun to speculate. Listen, if you feel free. If you guys want to look it up and check it out, do it. I'm not going to stop you, but I am going to talk about the cover to 155. Fabulous. Love it. It's got pretty much the whole crew. Nah, I mean, not every Joe. It's not like that Amazing 300 cover by Jamie Sullivan. Don't get me wrong, but it's got a lot of the crew that we've certainly come to know and love, and that have been prominent in the book. Mutt, Gung Ho, Snakes, Scarlet, Lady J, Falcon, looks like Clutch, Flint. I don't know who's over Lady J's shoulder though. He's in a gray shirt, blonde hair. Maybe that's supposed to be Duke? I don't know. Rock and Roll, Shipwreck, although Shipwreck looks way muscly. Quick Kick. I'm not sure who the guy with the striped helmet. Could that possibly be Lieutenant Gridiron, and that's a football helmet? Storm Shadow, Roadblock, who decided to show up to the flag retirement ceremony shirtless. Quick Kick I get, even though he's dead. Right? Let me check. Yeah, Quick Kick's dead, and he's on the cover. Shirtless. So maybe the ghost of Quick Kick. Maybe that's the ghost of Quick Kick. And Roadblock shows up, and he decided not to wear a shirt, even though I don't think any version of Roadblock was ever truly shirtless. The least he had was the tank top on, right? So we've got the ghost of Quick Kick, nudist Roadblock. I believe that's supposed to be Beachhead. I don't mean supposed to be in a bad way. It's dude covered in green, like with a green face mask on. So I imagine that's Beachhead. It's probably Leatherneck next to him. Tunnel Rat. I'm going counterclockwise on the page. I think that might be Tunnel Rat next to him. Is he wearing a bandana, or is that just a headband? Then there's a dude in a blue and dude in a green. No idea who they are. Then there's a dude in gray. No idea who that is. Then there's Spirit. So this is probably identified somewhere online, but again, I'm going off what's in front of me. And yeah, but it's a great cover though. It's really great. And here's what I appreciate. I appreciate that they didn't just give us the people. They Gosier and Scott Koblish worked in some of the equipment, so they're standing in front of a tomahawk, and you've also got the corner of a vamp in there. So it's and you can see that they're on the what'd you call that? Like computerized floor of the pit. It's hilarious though, and not mocking them for this because this is how like places like the pit are always drawn. You know, secret headquarters and everything. There's never any normal tile, right? There's never like, you just tile a floor. You lay a floor down, you put some Formica on it, or you put some nice Italian marble, and you just tile your floor. No, they're always like gridded, electronic, because you never know when you need to access a wire or a circuit board, because they're so packed with technology that even in the floor, you're going to have to pull up the floor to access this and that and the other. So they never actually have real tile. They just have Death Star tile, right? Like that circuit board tile. And again, it's not pointing fingers at G.I. Joe. This happens in a lot of, when you see high-tech bases drawn. So that's really funny. I don't know how you walk on this floor without killing yourself. That's the thing. Like, look at this floor. This is not a floor to be walked on, unless that's just funky stylized tile, which I don't think it is either. I think these are like access ports and super tech doodad stuff that they're standing on. So, but it does say, it says on the cover, it says, "This is it, the final issue of G.I. Joe." And it's got a nice, I like the cover, the logo treatment. They do a nice, fade out on the letters G.I. Joe, and even the red, white, and blue has a little color diffusion on it. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's, and it gets the point across. Even if you didn't have it, say, the final issue of G.I. Joe on the top, honestly, just this cover does exactly what a good cover is supposed to do, which is give you the overall gist of what's happening in the book, which is they're retiring the flag. And so it's pretty obvious. Everyone looks somber. It's good. Yeah. So, I mean, this cover totally works.
Yo, Joe!
Now, inside, you'd think you'd start with, and I like this, but you'd think, you'd start with, it's the final issue of G.I. Joe, so you'd be dealing with, the G.I. Joe team. But we don't. We're actually in the dream of a supporting cast member, in this case, Wade Collins, the former LRRP partner of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and Stalker, and then later on would become a Cobra Crimson Guard until he got recognized back, and the team convinced him to be a good guy and all that stuff. So Wade's been floating around. He actually showed up. He showed up like 10 issues ago or 5 issues ago to help Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and stuff. So he's been a presence in the book for a long time, and it opens on a flashback memory / dream of Wade taking point back in Vietnam, and you get Snake Eyes, Stalker, Storm Shadow, and then I think it's Dickie and Ramon behind him. Yes, I don't know I think that's Ramon, and then Dickie would be behind him. But they're walking line, and we know this story. Larry's told this story before, so this is for longtime readers. What I like about this is he certainly explains it in the captions, but it's also, as soon as you open this, you know where you're at. You've seen this story, and sadly, you know how it plays out.
Yo, Joe!
And this is where they got ambushed. So the dream he's having is kind of, again, it's a half memory, half dream. So they walk in, and then, the story goes that they were just kind of humping through Vietnam. They didn't expect to run into these NVA regulars, and the regulars certainly weren't looking for them, and that's what happened. So they all open into a clearing, and there's this moment of like, huh? And while the Viet Cong were also doing the same thing of like, huh? We're just having dinner. And then a firefight's about to open up. So the story is called A Letter from Snake Eyes. This is a 2-page, double splash page spread. Script, one more time, by Larry Hama. Pencils by Phil Gosier. Inks by Scott Koblish. Coloring by Shy. Letters by Vicky Williams. Editor Mike Lackey. And editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco. It's a good 2-page spread, and like all good 2-page spreads, not all good, I mean, certainly there's different ways to do them, but like any good 2-page spread, it's conveying two different thoughts. And I like that because it sets up one side of the equation, and then it sets up the other side of the equation, but it's all in one. So on the one side, you've got Wade, arming himself, and then the other side, you've got the Viet Cong arming themselves. But it's got nice flow to it. You got a bright full moon in the middle, illuminating everything. You've got one of the Viet Cong just sitting there eating dinner over a fire, trying to mind his own business, etc. So there we go.
Yo, Joe!
So now we are on page 4. And then old Snake Eyes breaks the ice with a long burst of 762 NATO. And it's Snake Eyes just going ham on these guys. And Stalker telling him to run and head to the rally point. Snake Eyes looking more like Roadblock in this moment. But that's the story. That's what he always did. So in the dream, he's Wade's dreaming that he empties his magazine, and then as he's running, and he runs right into a Viet Cong guy just shooting him and killing him. But that's when he wakes up. So he wakes up from a fever dream. He's on his own couch. It's just that dream again. It happened a long time ago in Vietnam, and he's just living in suburbia on his couch.
Yo, Joe!
And at that moment, a very familiar face to modern G.I. Joe fans, Kamakura walks in. But he's not Kamakura yet. He is Sean Collins, Wade's son. And future Snake Eyes himself, really, is what he is. So, a brief projection here. We know this is Sean, and then now we here in 2023 knows what happens to Sean. And it's not great. It's really not great. Sean becomes the new Snake Eyes after getting his face destroyed and its vocal cord severed, and so on and so forth. So he becomes the new Snake Eyes. So he becomes what he's being warned about in this very issue. So that's fascinating. I completely forgot that this is what happens. So Sean comes to his dad, Wade, and says, hey, I'm turning 17 next month. I want to enlist in the army. And Wade's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so they get in that argument. It's that argument. It's that father-son argument. And we get a little primer on what the Crimson Guardsmen are, where Sean says, he's not even my real dad. He's just another Cobra Crimson Guardsman that, just like my real dad was, they all had the same surgery to get the same face, and Sean replaced them. But, and then the wife says, that's all behind us now. We got away from Cobra. We made another life for ourselves. And Wade gives Sean a really good idea. He says, you know what? Maybe you should write to Snake Eyes, and he can tell you about being in the military better than anyone I know. Will you take the words of a real warrior? And Sean's like, okay, Dad, I'm going to do it.
Yo, Joe!
A week later in Utah, Stalker is heading to the pit, singing a military tune on the way in, over hill, over dale. And here we go with Spirit being the guardian to the pit, which is, again, a great gag. I talk about this on the Order of the Battle Pod. It's a great gag, and I love it. But can he really do that 24/7? That's a lot of pressure to put on one dude. Just saying, it's a lot of pressure. And what if he's got to go to the bathroom? What if he goes on a mission? Who's covering this entrance when Spirit's otherwise occupied? However, today the password is sesquipedalian, which, if we look up in the dictionary, means long-winded, long words. That's funny. And Spirit says, everyone's waiting for you down there. And Stalker says, they're waiting for what I'm carrying. That's all they're waiting for.
Yo, Joe!
So I feel like that's Stalker being like, no one loves me. Mail call. And And this is the first, now, if you see the cover, you know it's the end of the road. But this is actually the first time in the comic that we know that they're mothballing the pit. It says, we've been down here in the pit for 3 weeks getting the place mothballed. And someone points out, or actually it is, that is Duke, it appears to be. I don't understand why we have to go to all this trouble. We're being closed down, so why bother? And someone else, who I can't make out who it is, says the Honchos always change their mind. The pit has to be ready to be reactivated on a moment's notice, which is great. Because that's, that's speaking to the reader about the IP, saying, got to leave it in good hands. We have to leave the baby as we left it, or it was as we found it, because you never know when someone else is going to pick it up and do something else with it. It's, ultimately it's not their toy, so they can't break it. And at least that's what I'm reading this as Larry saying. So we got to take some time to kind of put things in order before we leave, which is great. And so Snake Eyes gets a letter. It's a personal letter, which catches Scarlett's, catches her ear, but also, is that jealousy? Is Scarlett like, who's writing my man? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's what that is. But apparently,
Yo, Joe!
as we find out on the next page, Snake Eyes takes the letter and storms out, kind of really, but takes the letter and walks out of the room. That, according to Scarlett, that's the first letter he's received since his whole family got murdered in the car crash all those years ago. So his entire time with G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes has never gotten a letter, because that happened right before he was enlisted. Well, actually, oh my God, wait a minute. His family got killed. Then he went to train with Storm Shadow. Then he came back and joined G.I. Joe. So he has never gotten a personal letter since before he trained with the Arishikages. He has never gotten mail. The man is off the grid.
Yo, Joe!
He looks like a zombie. Again, this is the mask. This isn't the art, I would say here. I don't like this mask where you can see his eyes. I'm not a fan. I don't think it works, because it makes him look like a stone cold psychopath, which is what he looks like in this picture. Especially with that crisscross belt zipper thing he's got going on that looks kind of like a boxer's safety belt. I don't know what's going on in his crotch, but Snake Eyes looks like he is a backwoods slasher. So now we get a couple pages of I'm sorry, I'm going to get that wrong. Sean's letter. So he's why did he write to Snake Eyes? And Sean's espousing that no one takes personal responsibility anymore. No one stands for anything. Kids aren't trying to be something. No one's. I'm going to school to be this, because I want to better my community or better my country or better my whatever. It's everyone's out for themselves. School and learning and discipline is just something to get over and to get through before you go on to become something unimportant.
Yo, Joe!
I'm paraphrasing here. And we've got a lot of these pictures, which in the language of comics, all these flashbacks are rounded edges on the square panels, which is great. That's a shorthand for flashbacks, which works really well. It's something that I think people, that's a little trick. We've talked about that before on the show. I think that's a lost art kind of a thing, or a lost piece of the language. Sean's lamenting that no one takes responsibility. They want to blame everyone else. This one photo is absolutely just the drug culture is too much. A lot of people getting high and making bad choices. And then the other right next to it is just rich yuppie people who don't care about anything. And whatever happened to being a pillar of the community and a paragon of virtue. But all he sees are, preachers and sports stars and brokers and bankers and politicians lying and cheating, and no one takes any of their own responsibility. So what's wrong with wanting a higher glory than personal wealth? What's wrong with seeking adventure in the defense of democratic ideals? So that's what Sean's letter is all about.
Yo, Joe!
This first panel is brilliant. It's wonderful. It is necessary to tell this story. I will say, Snake Eyes again looks like a serial killer with that mask on. I wish it was him in one of his other masks, but he just does. But storytelling wise, by both the art team and Larry, this first panel is brilliant because it makes you pause and introduces a pause because Snake Eyes is pausing, and it puts Snake Eyes in a thoughtful frame of mind. He does not have a pencil in his hand. He is not reading the letter. He is looking up. He has the letter in his hand. He is parsing this. It's really smart. It's really, I think, very necessary. A lot of rookie storytellers would have started this page with just the second panel, which is Snake Eyes writing. So you could move that second panel over here to the first panel and just do that. I think that would have been a rookie mistake, and Larry's no rookie. I'm the fridge and I'm the rookie. I may be large, but I'm no dumb cookie. It is, and I mean this. It's a really nice piece of storytelling to have this pause, this beat here. Very important. That also brings me to, this was the page that I realized it on my first read through, and I want to make sure to mention it again here. What I really enjoy about this issue from Phil Gosher and Scott Koblish is the lack of, we'll say, image influence in this issue. And that's, a broad stroke. We've talked about that before in this, where, that era of extreme faces and lots of screaming and no ankles and, awkward body poses and things like that, right? Whatever it is you think image of the 90s, represents, that's what we're talking about. They don't do that in this. The guys really go out of their way. This is a really grounded book. It's a really real book. And I think most of the, both in the writing and in the art, I really think it shines through. There's like one page later on that is kind of a glory shot, and it works really well, but it also works because it's like the only page in the book that's a glory shot. And we're about 5 or 6 pages from now. So I just want to take a moment to point that out. I really enjoy the art on this and just the patience that they're taking with this. So now the important thing is we're getting Snake Eyes' POV for the first time. This issue is one of the reasons why it bothered me so much in Dead Game that we got Snake Eyes' POV, because we're not supposed to get Snake Eyes' POV unless it's really, really special. And I would think the last issue of this series is probably it. The only time it's special enough. And he writes an amazing, so that's what the rest of this issue is him writing back to Sean. So we'll just do some recaps on it. But there's no honor or glory in the primary occupation of the soldier. There are only long stretches of interminable boredom, punctuated by brief flurries of pure terror. And he quotes that. So he's quoting someone else. And hold on, we'll find out. So from what I can find is this phrase that I believe Larry's used before, if memory's serving me. He's used before to have the Joes describe warfare or fighting. That this phrase actually originates from the World War I. Here's a snippet from the New York Times Current History of the European War, printed in 1915. Someone described, we've been out of work on our trenches, only shrapnel and snipers. Someone described this war, World War I, as, quote, months of boredom punctuated by moments of terror. So that seems to be the origins of this, which is neat. And now you know. It's a now you know moment. So he says there is no winning. And then there's it's about a 3/4 splash page of Snake Eyes, all tore up, and he is just surrounded by the bodies of the men he's killed. And this is, and he's not happy about it. He didn't feel good. He says, you talk about glory, and I suppose you mean heroism and all the accolades that adorn it. I've known some real heroes in my time, but pitifully few of them were the type to jump out of a foxhole and shout, follow me.
Yo, Joe!
And I gotta express, I really loved getting into Snake Eyes' head in this. And then we get the next couple pages each page is a breakdown of Snake Eyes describing his friends in the LRRP. So we're not even dealing with Snake Eyes describing the guys in the Joe unit. He's just going back to, he's making this real personal with Wade and with Sean and saying, you know, the Joes are the Joes. We're the best of the best, but like these are just dudes. And each story is tragic in its own right. So we get a recap of Ramon's story. And Ramon got a letter from home where his mom says that his little brother had just graduated from basic training and they were going to ship him out to Vietnam because Ramon was about to go home. He was what they call a 2-digit midget, a buku short timer. So as soon as he left Vietnam, the kid brother would be eligible to come in. This from that they don't call it this in here, but it's that Saving Private Ryan rule where you can't have family members serving in the same in the same war together. I don't know if that's still a rule. It should be. I don't know. But in order to stop his kid brother from going to Vietnam, Ramon re-upped. And just 2 weeks after Ramon re-upped, that was when they walked into that terrible valley from earlier in the comic. And Ramon and Dickie Saperstein got murdered. And according to Snake Eyes, Ramon didn't look all that heroic when he died. He just looked surprised. And there's a lovely image of Snake Eyes sitting alone at the mess table, writing all this out.
Yo, Joe!
Dickie Saperstein was a short timer too. He had less than 2 months before he was ready to go home, and he got a letter from his mother, and his dad was in the hospital. So in order to get money for the operation, I guess the military was offering in this case, Uncle Sugar, as they say. It was a cash re-up bonus. And so you'd get some money if you signed up to stick around. So he did that to pay for his dad's surgery, and then his dad died on the table. So his mom went nuts after that because her only son's still stuck in combat for another year. The dad is dead, and then Dickie got blown up in that valley. Now, according to Snake Eyes, Dickie could have gotten a compassionate release, but he felt, nope, I signed up for it. I'm going to do it. And according to Snake Eyes, he had the sense of honor, you see. He was doing his job out to outflank Charlie, and he ran right into a mine.
Yo, Joe!
These next two, I mean, those two were wonderful. But these next two, you get to it in Stalker and Storm Shadow, who literally are still alive and doing their thing. So I kind of went, well, this ain't going to be that sad, is it? Oh, but it is. So Stalker, he was looking a way to get from, quote, the mean streets of Detroit. It had already killed his 2 older brothers. He had a cousin in the engineers. He had a cousin who was in the military in Germany. So he had his cousin routing his post. He lied to his mom about being in Vietnam. So he would send the letters to this cousin in Germany, and then the cousin would send them to his mom, and vice versa. The mom would send them to Stalker, who she thought was in Germany, and then the cousin would route it to Vietnam. And apparently everyone, they used to sit around and make up stories about German stuff, like Oktoberfest and the foothills of Germany, to lie to Stalker's mom. But that's all Stalker wanted. Like, he just wanted out of Vietnam. He was not happy about that. He was not happy about being there, but he had a sense of duty.
Yo, Joe!
That's super tragic. Let's put it that way. You had to lie to your mom, though. Storm Shadow now. And this is where this is super tragic. He says long range recon is the Harvard University of sneak and peek. You get real good at creeping through the bush without making any noise. You get real paranoid. So it's like it's a doctorate program for Storm Shadow and ninja training. And so when Storm Shadow finished, he was basically a killing machine. Inside, you're still a big bad ninja killing machine, slithering through the endless triple canopy jungle. You're one tightly wound, ultra wacko psycho killer who desperately needs the strict discipline of a martial arts environment to cool you out and keep the devils in check. That sentence paragraph descriptor of Storm Shadow actually chilled me. And I'm not exaggerating that. I never looked at Storm Shadow that way. And to have that put into text like this really defines Storm Shadow's issues. that he needs this military, which is why I think explains why Larry had him keep coming back to serve with G.I. Joes, right? Instead of just being a Storm Shadow and being freelance stuff. If he doesn't have the discipline of the military, Storm Shadow will straight murder fools.
Yo, Joe!
Wait a minute. Why is Storm Shadow on the cover? Wasn't he still under hypnotism? Uh-oh. And then Snake Eyes. And of course we know Snake Eyes' tragic story. But I like the way that they shorthanded here. He says, I came from the war and everything I had was gone. People spat on me. He tried making a new start in the family business of my best friend, talking about Storm Shadow. That was a disaster. He went to lose himself in the mountains, but he just kept getting called back. So this is good. I like that we don't really rehash. We don't dwell on it. We just kind of, touch base, whatever. Works really well for the story. It also works for someone who he assumes knows his story. That was a disaster. It's just a great way to summarize the whole soft master, hard master murder, all that stuff. It's a great way to do that. I will say this. They've got Snake Eyes drawn getting yelled at by that protester, and he's in his civvies. He's supposed to have sunglasses on, but like they look really like reading glasses, like his eyes are huge. It just looks awkward. Because I remember in the original drawing, it's like he's wearing his sunglasses, and that was done so that we would never really see his face. And now that face thing is like that cat's out of the bag, so I get it that they don't have to hide it. But I think like he could have gone more harder sunglasses on this. I don't need to see his eyes here. I think it works a little cooler if it's sunglasses. Like, don't see his eyes.
Yo, Joe!
Anyway, nit to pick. But he goes further. He talks about how on that first mission, he got caught in the helicopter blast, and we just see a drawing of him being on fire. Wow. But we get this is an era that we never really touched on. It's his recovery. He was in a burn ward, so he spent months in a burn ward. And he said what day of the week? Tuesdays was debriding day, where that's the day they would pull the scabs off and change the dressing on all these people who had their flesh burned off. Which is horrific. He says there's never any way to shut out the screams of the burn victims as the dead tissue was flayed off them. Me, I couldn't have screamed if I wanted to. I was relatively lucky. I still had a face. He met dudes with no lips, no ears. One of them, his name was Travis, kept begging me to smother him with a pillow. It's real. It's real. It's sad. It's tragic. It's just really real. And he says, I got used to people. Is it? Oh, yeah. Oh, earlier on the page, Larry writes a great line. He says, because he's talking about having his face burned off. He says, I had to get used to the fact that people tend to stare fixedly at the top button on my shirt when they talk to me. Yeah. So it's not all glory. There's Sean.
Yo, Joe!
This is the page I was talking about with it. It is kind of glory, but it's a great looking page. But he says, if you're going to be a soldier, don't expect to be appreciated. Don't expect a nation to be grateful. Expect to see the worst humanity has to offer. Expect to see the best humanity has to offer. And it's a nice full splash page of kind of more the modern G.I. Joes. I kind of would have, there's a big part of me that wishes this would have been classic Joes. But it's Hawk, although no shade, Scott and Phil. Either you didn't draw Hawk's legs, or is that his one leg that's underneath Roadblock's right arm? But Hawk's body, his lower body disappears. I guess you could say that's the shadow of Hawk's left thigh, but then because the way he's standing, it looks like Hawk has no torso. I take that back. Rather, Hawk is only torso. He has no legs. But whatever. I'm just poking fun. But it's Hawk and Roadblock and Stalker, Scarlet in the middle, Storm Shadow, and then Snake Eyes. It's good. It's a good, anyway, you got rockets and they're all shooting, they're waving the American flag. There's seemingly out of the smoke, there's bad guys, crouching towards them. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I like the picture. Don't get me wrong. I just do kind of wish this, because this is the final issue, it would have been a little bit of a little more of a vintage shot. Like even Snake Eyes is in his modern look, it's not my favorite, but I think anyone would agree that's not his best look.
Yo, Joe!
So that's when he's interrupted by Scarlet checking in on him. She says it's time. Hawk's retiring the colors. And so now we get a little bit of Snake Eyes' the final bits of the letter to Sean. After all of this discouragement, do I have any regrets about having been a soldier? He says, not a one. I had the privilege and honor of serving with men and women whom I depend on utterly. I've had comrades lay down their lives for me, and I would have gladly laid them down for them. They laid mine down for them. How many other occupations engender such camaraderie? But then again, this, quote, bearing of arms in the defense of the Constitution of the United States of America is not really a profession per se. And we get a nice kind of a wide shot of everyone. Wild Bill's there, Flint, Roadblock, Rock and Roll. Again, Quick Kick. Rest in peace. I think this is the issue that people give Larry shit over. Pardon my French. Larry the business over, forgetting that Quick Kick died. But you know what, guys? You know what? Maybe the editor should have caught that.
Yo, Joe!
Maybe Larry's a sucker for a guy with no shoes, no shirt, all service. And the Snake Eyes says it's not a call, or it's not a profession, it's a trust. And we see Duke and Stalker folding the flag. So, and Snake Eyes and the gang all saluting it for one last time.
Yo, Joe!
And that was it. And they're gone in the night. The story cuts back to Sean reading the letter. And, Wade says, if you're still intent, I won't be a jerk about it. We can talk about it. But Sean says, I still have time to think about this some more. And he says, it's always the best course of action. Take as long as you want. And they hug. So it's a nice little moment. Storytelling wise, very smart. You get this a lot. You get this in movies. Think about the way they told these cutaways in The Princess Bride, where you get that moment of climax and like, dun dun dun, they're about to get married, and then it would cut to Fred Savage in bed going like, she can't marry him, like that. Those moments of heightened tension, heightened drama. Then you cut away to whoever's telling the original story. Very smart, very cool.
Yo, Joe!
And the mom, who I don't know if we ever got her name, she says, did you notice the envelope from Snake Eyes? It doesn't have a return address. No post, no APO, not anything. What do you suppose that means? And it's deactivated. So the pit is deactivated. There's chains on the barbed wire. No trespassing. The Quonset huts are still there, but everything is sealed up. The moon is shining overhead. And there are no Joes to be seen.
Yo, Joe!
And that's it. That's it, man. What a way to end G.I. Joe. Crazy. There's 2 pages of postbox from the pit. First, we get a little inbox message from Mike, and he confirms this is the last issue of G.I. Joe. No one's sadder than him, except for maybe lethal Larry Hama. He thanks Larry. And then Larry really gives a nice write-up. It's a, 2.5 column write-up. 2.5, like full page, 2.5 column write-up of his thanks and just his thoughts on writing this for 155 issues. And no other licensed comic book has ever gotten this far, which to this day we've talked about. I don't think they have. At least in one consecutive run. Thanks all the artists that worked on it. Yeah, it's great. If you have an opportunity to read it, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but if you have an opportunity to read it, it's really nice notes. He thanks the readers. Apparently Thomas Wheeler, whose name has come up here a lot, apparently literally wrote every issue. He sent them a letter to the pit every issue. So good on you, Thomas. So then we have some final letter pages from Rafael Jimenez in Santa Fe, Bogota, Colombia. Magnus Laugio from Norway, Oslo, Norway. Stephen Goodfellow from Clydebank, Scotland. So it's all international, folks. I like that. Kenneth Hui Leong from Malaysia. And Omar Leonardo Perez from Puerto Rico. And then, last letter, Dear Larry and Mike, how could you guys do this to me? I just moved to New York. I've got bills to pay. What am I going to do for work? Can you spare any change? Signed, Phil Gosier, cardboard box number 3, Skid Row, USA. That's very funny. And we get a note that says next issue, well, even though there won't be a G.I. Joe 156, we still have one more ace up our sleeve. Years back, a young guy named Todd McFarlane penciled an issue of G.I. Joe 61. So, so shipping the second week of December, after 8 long years in a drawer, we're proudly publishing this gem from the past. So, so this was the final one of the year. It's shipped in December. Great. And that's it. And they included a drawing of the Neil Adams Cobra Commander, which we've talked about before. Cobra Commander drawing his pistol. Really nice. So Cobra Commander does make an appearance in the final issue of G.I. Joe. And that's it. The phone call over. That's it for G.I. Joe 155, guys. That's it for Joe on Joe Illustrated for now. We won't be revisiting this format for a little bit. I think I'm going to just move focus over to You on Joe. And that should be starting up all, Lord willing and the creek don't rise. That'll be here next week, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. There'll be a new fresh podcast next week. But for now, if you've enjoyed the format of Joe on Joe Illustrated, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't enjoyed the format, thank you so much for listening, because that's a lot to listen through if you didn't like this format. But it allowed me to do this show during the heart of the pandemic and not have to worry about interviews and tracking and seeing people in person and, tracking stuff down and watching together and, the watch alongs we have to watch video. It's a whole thing. So it allowed me to do this show by myself and still produce content, but also still make headway into G.I. Joe. I will eventually go back, and I imagine I will go back and do more comics. We definitely still need to get to special missions, which now we're out of sync on that. So I'm feeling that'll be a Patreon thing. I know I believe in my heart that if I do pick when we next revisit Illustrated, I am not going to pick it up with 155.5, but I will be picking up it with Devil's Due, because for me, the reader, that was the continuation of the story. And I know later on then Larry swooped back and said, no, this is the real continuation. But I enjoyed the Devil's Due stuff, and I like the way that it flowed off of this Larry Hama stuff. So I imagine that would be the next step, but it's going to be a little while until we get there. I think I got to put a little breather on this portion in this style. So so there you go. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I certainly appreciate you all. And I'll see you here next week for a new format of the show for You on Joe. And so until then, now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.